Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Discovery Season 1, Episode 5, Choose Your Pain. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Discovery, so I'm going to have to start with a spoiler warning for Star Trek Discovery up to Season 1, Episode 5. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So I'm just going to go right out and say it. This was by far my least favorite episode of the show so far. Now, this isn't to say I think the series is going to suck or that it isn't Star Trek or anything like that. All the haters have been pasting all over the internet. But every Star Trek series has bad episodes, and for Discovery, this is most certainly one of them. And it does have me a little bit worried about how the rest of the series following will come, and hopefully it doesn't fall into the same traps that this episode did. But overall, this was kind of a bland, unoriginal, episodic episode that did little in terms of character, story, or development. In fact, the few character moments we did get in this episode were mostly bad and having characters act dumb and moronic. But before I talk about this, let me mention a bit about last week's episode. I want to address some criticism about last week's episode, as I saw a few reviewers claim the characters in last week's episode acted like idiots, and I disagree to an extent. Because with Commander Landry, she did most certainly act like an idiot. I even pointed this out in my review, but I could understand why she acted like an idiot, as she was being pushed to the limit of her stress point, and with Lorca recklessly pushing her emotional buttons by playing the clips of the colonists dying, combined with her hatred and jealousy of Burnham, I could see why she would disregard her advice and take action to help save those colonists' lives. Don't get me wrong, it was still dumb, but I buy it, where many reviewers did not. However, some also claim that Lorca was being an idiot by bringing Discovery to the colony and not firing back at the Klingons as they bombarded his ship. And I very, very, very strongly disagree. In fact, I would say not only is Lorca not being an idiot, this scene actually shows he's a military genius, that he has nerves of steel, that he's able to just sit there to draw the Klingons in order to destroy their ships. I mean, he destroyed 3 Klingon ships in one move. How in the hell does this make him an idiot? It makes him a genius. These complaints are absurd, outright absurd. Now, you may be wondering, why am I talking about Episode 4 in my Episode 5 review? Well, it's relevant, as while I disagree that Starfleet officers were acting uncharacteristically dumb in last week's episode, I actually thought they were acting uncharacteristically dumb in this episode. More specifically, Commander Saru, whom I lost a lot of respect for in this episode. It seems he was being obtuse, petty, idiotic, and directly defying the core principles of Starfleet. By just disregarding what Burnham and xenobiologists warned about the hazardous effects the spore drive has on the tardigrade is inexcusably idiotic. Like, I understand he doesn't trust nor particularly like her, but the way he just dismisses the fact that they're causing a creature physical pain to the point of killing it is extremely un-Starfleet-like. I may expect something like this from a hard-ass like Lorca, but even then, that's a bit of a stretch. And it gets worse later, where the doctor, chief engineer, and xenobiologists all agree, after the creature goes into extra life-saving mode, and Saru is still arrogant, ignorant, and stubborn, as he refuses to listen to all the experts and orders them to perform a procedure that they all say will kill the one rare creature whom Starfleet is searching the galaxy for and can't find. Therefore, it is a rare and valuable commodity, and he doesn't give a crap about losing the only one, regardless of any moral. Just forget about the moral implication for a second. Starfleet needs this one rare special creature, and he just wants to kill it. Now, the Doctor outright says that the tardigrade could be sentient, and Saru's response is, well, I'll face the consequences if it is. But really, that his sentient or not shouldn't be that big of an issue, as even if it isn't sentient, what he's doing would be considered animal cruelty, which Starfleet has very, very strict laws against. As I mentioned before, practices of torturing alien creatures, sentient or not, for gain, regardless of how much gain it is specifically against Federation law and Starfleet regulations, and I totally do not buy that a Starfleet officer would so blatantly disregard this without even discussion, regardless of the result. I mean, I would have bought it more if Saru actually took their advice into mind, but he just came in like an idiot and was like, "I'm the captain, you do what I say." As this is something Captain Ransom did when extreme circumstances. Again, he was in extreme circumstances. Saru was just trying to rescue one guy. That's not extreme circumstances. Anyway, Ransom was in extreme circumstances, being trapped in the Delta Quadrant, trying to get home while his crew was starving and dying. So he violated Starfleet principles he did so grossly that regardless of the extreme circumstances that he was in, Janeway wanted to kill him because of it. Saru doesn't strike me as someone so blatantly moral corrupt as Ransom anyway, which is actually kind of ironic that he accuses Burnham of being morally corrupt, when in reality nothing she did was nearly as bad as what he's doing now. So I don't buy that a Starfleet crew would let him get away with this. I mean, the Doctor did refuse, as did Burnham, which were nice touches, and Stamets did trick him, but really no one on the crew should have been okay with this. And further, Saru should have been charged with a general court-martial and stripped of all ranks because of his actions, even with what happened in the episode with the creature being fine. It's still... And they should have mutinied, really. They should have relieved him of duty for violating Starfleet regulations so grossly. I mean, again, Janeway wanted to kill a Starfleet officer for doing what Saru is doing. Just a reminder. Anyway, I mean, we're meant to believe all is well and good at the end of the episode because he eventually orders Burnham to save the tardigrade's life, when realistically at this point, it could have been too late. But because she was such a genius, she does find a way to do it. But really, he basically ordered the death of an alien, sentient or not, to save one Starfleet officer. By all accounts, this is an extremely gross violation of Starfleet principles and way worse than anything Burnham has done. He should have been dragged away in chains. Further, it's only because Stamets defied his orders that the tardigrade didn't die, and Stamets actually nearly died instead as a result. So his blatant disregard of Starfleet regulation nearly led to the death of another Starfleet officer. Saru should be court-martialed, plain and simple. It's going to be hard for me to take this character seriously or to get behind his actions ever again after what he did in this episode. What I was expecting from this episode was Star Trek moral dilemmas that they do really great, where they're forced to choose between alien cruelty and the conversations brought up. Is this right what we're doing? Is this wrong? But we didn't get that in this episode. We just got Saru being a pig-headed idiot and just ignoring what everyone else had to say. Now, not only that, but Saru's he's just acting like a gigantic moron throughout the whole episode, as every time Burnham, the lead xenobiologist, brought to him legitimate complaints about the mistreatment and torture of a living being, he instead talks about his personal disagreements and what Burnham did in the past, which is extremely unprofessional of him. And like an idiot, he makes decisions based on his personal dislike of an individual and his almost childlike notion that people need to respect his authority without actually hearing what they have to say. And he does this to the point of torturing and nearly killing a sentient being. So I'm now thinking Saru being promoted so quickly was a mistake, and done so out of desperation because of the ongoing war, and that he has absolutely no business being in a command position. We get the storyline of Saru studying the great Starfleet captains and asking the computer to judge him by those standards. First of all, the fact he's even doing this shows that he shouldn't be in a command position, but moreover, when he has the computer list the qualities that make these captains great, one of the qualities it lists is compassion, and yet throughout the whole episode he shows none. And by the end of the episode, he doesn't listen to the computer's results stating, "Oh, I know what I did." Really? Does he know how horribly he fucked up? And the results would likely tell him that he's nothing like those great commanders and that he basically sucks? Because I'm sure that's what it would have told him. The computer would have been like, "You suck." I suppose he just didn't want to hear that. And Burnham was being far too nice to him, telling him he did a great job when he did a shit job. I guess it just goes to show how much better of a person that she is than him, yet she's the one everyone treats like shit. But since I touched on it, why don't I get to that scene where Saru had the computer list the great Starfleet captains, both living and deceased. All the captains listed were known characters in Star Trek lore, and it is very obvious was listed in alphabetical order. First, we get Captain April, who was never mentioned in established Star Trek canon, unless you consider the animated series canon, as apparently many fans now do, as he did make an appearance there. Robert April was a character created by Gene Roddenberry, who was said to be the captain of the Enterprise before Pike, so the first captain of that Enterprise. And typically, a picture of Roddenberry himself was used in the supplemental material whenever showing a picture of Captain April. So, next character listed with Jonathan Archer, who of course is the main captain, played by Scott Bakula on Star Trek Enterprise. I'm not sure I'd classify him as one of the greatest captains, as he was pretty much an incompetent idiot most of the time, but he was the first Starfleet captain, so I guess its feasible history would glorify him a bit more than he deserved. And the Enterprise reference was nice to have there too. So then there's Matthew Decker, who was Commodore Decker, as seen on the original series episode Doomsday Machine, in which he makes a lot of idiotic decisions that nearly gets everyone killed while suffering from PTSD, but I suppose he could have been a great captain before that. Then there's Philippa Georgiou, which of course is a reference within Discovery because it refers to the captain in the first two episodes. I'm a bit surprised she's considered one of the best Starfleet captains ever to exist, especially considering it's basically her fault the war with the Klingons began, but whatever. And then there's Christopher Pike, which of course refers to Captain of the Enterprise seen in the first ever Star Trek pilot, The Cage. Now, in this time period, Pike is currently the captain of the Enterprise, so it may be a bit premature to call him one of the greatest Starfleet captains ever, but whatever. Anyway, I did find all the Star Trek lore references nice, but I didn't go like all crazy over it because it was a bit obvious pandering. Plus, it would have been more plausible had at least some of these names been unfamiliar ones, but whatever. So anyway, let me switch gears to the Lorca storyline. Now, probably my favorite scene of the episode was at the start with the Starfleet briefing Lorca went to with the admirals, and with Admiral Cornwell in particular, as I'm really liking this character and the relationship that she has with Lorca. I love the interactions that they had after the briefings, as Lorca felt ambushed by the fact she was essentially grounding him. Now, I can see both sides of this argument, as Cornwell is completely sensible that they only have one working spore drive, so it doesn't make sense to risk it until they're able to create more. But I also see Lorca's perspective that they're able to affect a lot of change in the war, including saving many lives. Taking them out of commission could be a tactical error that Starfleet can't afford. So I think they're both right and they're both wrong. which is what makes it really interesting. I don't really like that Cornwell was against him conscripting Burnham. I guess it makes sense that she'd find it a bit questionable, but I hope they don't follow up on this. Like, for example, I hope we don't get an episode about Starfleet overriding his decision, trying to send her back to prison, and they have to have like a hearing about her and people trying to defend her. Oh my god. I find it so incredibly cliche. And if they did anything like that, like, oh, she's going to be sent back, I would just hate it. So I really hope they don't do that. So we'll see. Anyway, Lorca's storyline goes downhill after that when we get such a cliche, tired, and unoriginal and unrealistic sci-fi story of Lorca's shuttle getting captured by the Klingons, why he's traveling in the mere shuttlecraft out in the open where he could be captured by Klingons, who knows, but he is. And of course this red shirt with him, who was wearing blue but he should have been wearing red, really, just gets killed and they take Lorca. Why they have these other Starfleet officers, I don't know. Anyway, so he's in the cell forever before he escapes by the end of the episode, which you know he's going to escape. Yawn. Super yawn. Double yawn. I felt like I've seen this episode a billion times before, and that's because in some variation or another I have. I found nothing about this particularly interesting, and nothing really stood out. The Klingon interrogation thing felt kind of pointless. And of course I have to address the Harry Mudd in the room. Now, I do have to admit, I do have a bit of a bias against the whole character of Harry Mudd, as I never liked him in the first place, and both episodes he appeared in the original series are among my least favorite episodes of that show. And of course I am less excited about the prospect of this character becoming a recurring character on the show, which apparently he is. And honestly, he didn't seem particularly Harry Mudd-like to me. They could have just made up any new character and called him that. It's just like the whole Sarek thing. The whole point seemed to pander to Star Trek fans. It doesn't really add anything to the story, and I'm not particularly interested to see this character again. Although I will say I did find the revelation that he was spying for the Klingons and the fact that Lorca left him behind because of that somewhat interesting, but for the most part, bleh. So, Harry Mudd wasn't the only one Lorca met in the cell. We also get the introduction of Ash Taylor. And to be honest, when I first watched this episode, I assumed that he was a Klingon spy, and I kept expecting some revelation once he got back to Discovery, like him trying to kill Lorca, or him like wink to the camera and give an evil smile. However, after I watched the episode, it was pointed out to me that the actor that plays this character is listed among the main cast members, and in fact, he's been listed in the cast for the 4 previous episodes that he hasn't been in. So he's actually meant to become a main character. It doesn't preclude the possibility of him being a Klingon spy, but does make it less likely. But in the light of this, I do think this is a good idea to introduce main characters in such a way as it endures him more to the audience. There are many episodes in which they have a guest character who might join the ship, but they never actually do because, you know, they're just a guest of the week. So that's what Lieutenant Tyler looked like to me. So it's interesting that he's actually sticking around. And I hope they actually do stuff like this more often. It's one thing I like about Discovery is how it breaks a lot of these Star Trek conventions. So switching gears to Burnham, who didn't appear much in this episode, but I'd probably say she was my favorite character of the episode. I loved the way the episode started with her having nightmares about the tardigrade and her subsequent quest to save it. I hated Saru's reaction to having her save it, and I totally didn't buy it was coming from a trained Starfleet officer, but I liked her part of the story, including her interactions with Tilly, and I'm really enjoying their friendship as I think it really works. But I feel I have to reveal, I have to talk about the scene where Tilly dropped the F-bomb, as there's been quite a bit of controversy over this, as I knew there would be, even though there shouldn't be, because it's fucking ridiculous. Who fucking cares if they use the fucking word fucking on Star Trek? I'm fucking sick of fucking people making such a big fucking deal of using the word fuck. Who fucking cares? Fuckity fuck. Frankly, it's people who make this word into a big deal that gives it power, and I'm fucking sick of the uppity people making such a big fucking deal over it. Now, I heard some accusations that this dialogue was thrown in just to appear hip and edgy, and ironically, I think Enterprise was actually much worse when it came to this. Whenever Archer used the word ass, it felt like an obvious and fake attempt to appear all edgy and hip, kind of like when your dad says something like this. However, Tilly, the way she used it seemed really natural, and it didn't come off as gimmicky or attention-grabbing at all. In fact, I thought this was a great, humorous character moment in the show, and I love Stamets' response, where he's like, "You're right, it is fucking cool." I think it sets up these characters nicely, so anyone who says that the scene wasn't Star Trek because they dropped an F-bomb needs to fucking lighten up. So, I liked Stamets in this episode as he stood up to that madman Saru who, when he ordered him to kill a sentient being just to rescue one man. Anyway, Stamets had the guts to put his life on the line instead by injecting himself with the tardigrade serum. And then we see the first openly gay relationship in Star Trek, which I do think is a big deal, as none of the other Star Trek series had the guts to do this. And I totally buy this relationship, as well as it makes Stamets' act of sacrifice a bit of a romantic gesture because he knew it would upset the Doctor to kill the tardigrade. It should upset any rational human being who isn't a psychopath. But anyway, it's cool that he did it for him. But then, of course, the episode ends with a nifty cliffhanger where Stamets' reflection in the mirror acts all weird, and this is meant to hint at some unintended side effect from injecting himself with the tardigrade serum, which is interesting. However, I think this is pretty heavy-handed foreshadowing about the mirror universe. Get it? Mirror, because Stamets' reflection is in the mirror, and it's the mirror universe, and he's looking in the mirror, and he's in the mirror, and it's called the mirror universe because it's the mirror universe, which has to do with mirrors. Get it? Get it? Get it? I bet you don't get it. Anyway, if that turns out to be the case, I'll find this very clunky, ridiculous setup, but we'll see. So my rating for Choose Your Pain out of 10 is a 4 poor. This was the one episode that felt like an episode from a lesser subpar sci-fi show rather than a high-quality Star Trek show. The captive storyline was boring. Saru acting like an insecure, idiotic maniac where there's no excuse for his behavior was unacceptable. And we got the unnecessary pandering appearance of Harry Mudd, a character I never liked in the first place and certainly did not want to see again. Overall, this episode was just boring, and I hope it's not an indicator of what is to come. So that's it for my review of Choose Your Pain. Be sure to check back here every week as I continue to review episodes of Discovery. Also check out my channel for more Star Trek reviews of all 5 Star Trek series, as well as many other videos on other shows like Game of Thrones, The Expanse, Mr. Robot, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. Thanks a lot for watching.